Hello and a very warm welcome indeed to Quadriga, and our focus this week is on dramatic developments here in German politics. The Grand Coalition government in Berlin has been thrown into disarray by the resignation of the leader of the Social Democrats, the junior coalition partner, Andrea Nahles. Her announcement that she was throwing in the towel came after a disastrous showing for the SPD in the recent European election. Chancellor Merkel said she regretted the decision but pledged that her government would somehow soldier on. Critics, though, are not convinced, saying the end is nigh for the coalition, and that would also spell the end for the Chancellor. So our question here on Quadriga this week is, coalition crisis, Merkel teetering? And to answer that question, I'm joined here in the studio by journalist and author Andreas Kluth, who says, in effect, Angela Merkel now runs a caretaker government with no residual ambition at all. That is tragic for Germany and tragic for Europe, indeed. Also with us is Vanessa from Zeit online, who argues that the ruling coalition is shying away from a reset, as she puts it. In the end, this might harm both parties and our democracy. And a very warm welcome to Cordula Tutt from the business weekly Wirtschaftswoche, who believes grand coalitions disrupt the traditional party system and so do huge shifts within the electorate. Very interesting statements. Thank you all three for being with me here on Quadriga this week. I'd like to begin with you, Cordula. A lot going on here in Berlin at the moment. Talk of crisis in the government. Why are people saying that the government's days are numbered?
Well, I wouldn't say that the days you can already count for the next elections to come up, but this government is now buying time, and there is not too much probably to expect to be taken from this government anymore.
So, from what you're saying, the foreign countries and international partners of Germany who are looking on at the current situation, they can rest assured that Angela Merkel has her steady hand on the tiller, that the government is more or less functioning as usual.
Yes, they're functioning, they're managing, yes. But they're not, they are just trying to buy time to find out who's going to lead the Social Democrats, which is the next step they're all interested in. And before that, which is probably only after the elections in the East, because they're all quite afraid of what is going to happen in the East, not much is going to happen.
Vanessa, do you buy into all this? Angela Merkel's government has been described as a coalition of the desperate, and you have said that it's potentially a threat to our democracy. That sounds a lot more dramatic and threatening indeed.
I think it's a coalition of losers because de facto they have lost a lot of voices. Lots of people don't really want this kind of government anymore, and the longer they keep the power, I think they will just harm themselves in the end and not really bring up the reforms that everybody urgently needs.
Andreas, I would like to bring you in, but first of all, I'd like to go to a statement from a man called Dieter Kempf. He is the influential president. You're nodding, Andreas. He's the president of the Federation of German Industries, the BDI, and he didn't mix his words when he described the growing mood of crisis surrounding Angela Merkel's fourth government. Let's listen to what he had to say, and then we'll hear from Andreas.
A lot of the issues the Grand Coalition addresses do not or no longer reach a large majority of the people. The coalition government, let me make this very clear, has gambled away a lot of trust.
The coalition government has gambled away a lot of trust. That's pretty strong words. Is this a dangerous time for people in government to be rocking the boat?
Not dangerous, but the problem with the trust is that the German economy, so both the Mittelstand of family-owned firms and the listed DAX firms, they are very unhappy because they're simply pointing out what everyone knows, is that there hasn't been any meaningful domestic reform under Merkel ever. The last big reform was a labor market reform under her predecessor. Since then, she's managed very effectively several international crises, but she's done nothing at home. And there are big problems having to do with investments that are too low. Germany has been investing too little, both public and private sector. There's the big issue of China and America and little Germany and Europe getting ground up between them. There's artificial intelligence and the digital transformation where the German economy is behind. And now there's climate change and energy and all these other things. So there's a lot of things that should be happening that, that are masked by the putative success of the German economy, which shouldn't be taken for granted ever. And that's why a lot of managers, a lot of business owners, business entrepreneurs are very upset because nothing's being done.
You have been nodding, Cordula.
Well, it was always the big strength of Angela Merkel, being good at reacting, being good at balancing. That's her kind of leadership. Mm-hmm. But now I think we are quite at some point that is comparable to the point that her predecessor, Gerhard Schröder, was at. He had, we remember maybe, it was sick man of Europe, Germany isn't working, all these things, and he had its huge labour market reform. We're still seeing the profits of that. Mm-hmm. And now we're in a situation that Angela Merkel should react, and the latest election results are a big sign. Now do something. Climate change is not just about having a price on carbon and having some tax, maybe. It's about restructuring the whole economy, and she should be bold and now taking the step. Taxes, all the industry will be changed if you go on that path.
A sense here, Vanessa, of what is at stake here in Germany. What is at stake in Europe in this crisis?
We can see in each country populism rising, especially the right-wing populism. And I think that Germany now has to be strong, show that we can be like a modern working society that can also tackle climate crisis and stay open while not letting right-wing populists take over. So this is what is at stake now, because I believe that when Germany becomes even more less stable and just dealing with all those little things, then we cannot stop this wider movement.
So the crisis we're talking about came about because of Germany's Social Democrats hemorrhaging support, but Angela Merkel's Christian Democrats are also under huge pressure. They too suffered a demoralising setback in the recent European election. For many years now, of course, the Conservatives' main asset, their unique selling point, has been one person who we've mentioned already.
After keeping a low profile in recent months, Chancellor Merkel has re-emerged and is acting as a pillar of strength.
We
will continue the government's work with all due seriousness and, above all, with a great sense of responsibility.
Last December, Angela Merkel handed over responsibility for leading her party, the CDU, to Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer. She was to continue Merkel's legacy and succeed her as Chancellor in 2 years' time. The Christian Democrats have little to offer young people worried about climate change. That's clear from the success of this protest video by blogger Rezo.
In this video, I'll show you how folks from the CDU lie, how they lack the basic skills to do their jobs, and how they're wrecking our lives and future.
His video, The Destruction of the CDU, has racked up almost 15 million views. But the CDU has yet to come up with a cogent response. The Chancellor's current crisis management is a far cry from her "we can do this" stance back in 2015. Are new parliamentary elections on the horizon in Germany?
Lots of talk of fresh elections, lots of talk about Frau Merkel not being able to contain the crisis. Has she lost her magic touch that has kept her in power for so long?
How has she lost it? Well, that's a very good question. I don't think that she has really lost it. I think many people still appreciate this woman. But in the end, she just managed a lot of crises, and she didn't bring up she didn't tackle the big questions that are now coming to the streets, and the big questions that now the youth is addressing, for example. These were everything this government did in the past year since they are in power, like 2005, is that they corrected these little things.
They tweaked politics.
Yes, they tweaked this and that, and then I think, and now people just have this bigger questions rising and saying, hey, what happened in the past like 10 years, and where are the bigger issues going? The world is changing so fast, and why are you not really dealing with these?
So the question is then, Andreas, why is Angela Merkel acting effectively as a sort of a parallel German foreign minister on the international stage, very visible, but at home?
Why?
She's failing to tackle the problems that you have all three been talking about here.
Well, the immediate reason is that she made herself a lame duck by stepping back when there were... by the way, you just mentioned, has she lost her touch? As Vanessa just said, she hasn't lost her magic touch at all. She's been in power so many years, and she's still there, and she probably will still eke out the rest of this term.
But she's supposed to be handing the baton of power now on to Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer, and she still is. And they're very close to, I mean, to stick with the metaphor, to actually dropping the baton.
Well, there's a problem that we have to start talking about with Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer, that great long German name, AKK. But while you're talking about Merkel, she is doing this optimally. She's doing this as skillfully as you can in her position do this. No CDU chancellor before her has done it this well. They all were voted out or kicked out or pushed out. And we've been talking since 2015 about her being pushed out, and here she still is. And one thing she did was that tactical decision last December she preempted a coup that she heard about by stepping back from the chairmanship of her party with the intention that AKK got it. AKK had to fight for it, and with the intention that she could now groom, or that AKK could basically do a long internship to become... Angela Merkel wasn't born chancellor either. If you go back to her early years as minister and then as party leader, she had a lot of learning to do as well. And so she knows AKK has to do that. AKK is less popular now than Merkel is. Germans still like Merkel. She's also less known, and she's struggling a bit now. But that's what they're going to work on, is basically give her an internship, let her learn and come back. I've just got to come back to you a wee bit, because you're breaking a lance here for Angela Merkel and saying that she's still pretty much on course. But at the top of the show, we had you saying Angela Merkel is at the helm of a caretaker government with no residual ambition at all. I was talking to her magic touch is simply her ability to stay in power. Okay, now the question is she doing anything with that power? And you already heard that from Cordula. She hasn't really done much with her power all these years. So the last big reform was under her predecessor.
Except for migration, but...
Except for, well, two decisions, one on nuclear power, which probably was the wrong one. As we get into climate, we'll have to talk about, this debate is coming up, was it smart to exit nuclear power before coal-generated power? So they're going to talk about that. And then the big one was on migration in 2015. That's true. So that she has left a legacy. But no, there's a lot of problems that she can't deal with because she's a lame duck. She did that intentionally, tactically, to hold on to power.
OK, enough about Angela Merkel for just a moment. Cordula, tell us about the backdrop to a lot of what we're talking about here, is this notion of the German Volksparteien and the idea that they are in pretty much terminal demise. What do you make of all that, and can you explain it a little bit for our viewers?
Well, this traditional system is probably history now. The latest European election results have shown that. So traditionally in post-war Germany, West Germany and now complete Germany, we had two camps, centre-right, centre-left, and two big parties, one a little bit more to the right, the Christian Democrats, and one a little bit more to the left, the Social Democrats. And the idea was that these two parties always could get a majority and that they had different concepts, and if one government was not delivering anymore, the other could take over. And having these three grand coalitions with Angela Merkel already, this whole idea is now just not working anymore, because Angela Merkel has turned to the left. She's a social democrat, as some people in her party say, and this is not a positive thing in her party. And on the other hand, we had before Gerhard Schröder, who also turned to the right and was doing something his own electorate wasn't really saying was a good thing. So this whole idea is now not working anymore, and we don't have any, probably any new parties that give us an idea how it could work.
Mm-hmm. So the traditional German parties being swept aside to a certain extent, Vanessa, by tectonic changes there, and among those, there's a lot of talk about another tectonic change in German politics. Suddenly, the social media people are having an influence on German politics. It's being described as a new generation in German politics. Is that all hype, or is there something in it?
I think there's something in it. I wouldn't say social media, but people who are very savvy on communication. They know how communication works. They know how to get lots of followers, how to which words to use to really reach a wider audience, the younger ones, those who are not well educated, and so on and so on. And so they are all quite young, but pros in what they do, and they just sneak into the political discourse, and we see that the major parties are really failing at understanding them and also in adequately reacting to it, because they seem so helpless. They don't even know what to do with all those kids on the street, for example. They don't know what to do with this Rezo video. They try to answer them by their own videos, but these do not really work because they're simply not experienced in it. It's not part of their language.
When we talk about big parties in demise, that it doesn't quite apply across the board, because the new big force in German politics, according to a poll from just a couple of days ago, is the Greens. They are now the strongest party in German politics, according to that one poll. Where does that come from then, Andreas?
That is the direct counter to the rise, the preceding rise of the Alternative for Germany, because what's happened is you had this old left-right spectrum that Cordula described through most of post-war West German history. But then a new spectrum, as in other countries, in the entire West, and from France, Australia, everywhere, which is open-closed. And the Alternative for Germany, especially after the big migration year, 2015, took the clear stance for a closed society, especially towards foreigners and migrants. Now, of all the other parties, the Greens are the ones who took the clearest stance for an open society. And so you saw that the people who wanted a clear message of closed went for the AfD, but it stuck nationally at about 13% and higher in the East. But the people who definitely wanted to plump for open, they went to the Greens. The Free Democrats, the Liberal Party, could have played that role but didn't. So the Greens have now also come to personify, to embody openness. And that explains their rise in the recent years. And the question is, can they rise even more and even become the strongest party, as one poll showed? And
Cordula, the Greens are often accused now, when other parties are looking at their success, they're accused of being a sort of a one-policy party. Do you buy into that?
No, definitely they're not. I'd even say they're a bit nerdy, because they're always trying to come up with concepts and be prepared to take over some kind of part of government. So, no, they're probably not one-issue party anymore. They are strong with climate change, and they're strong with all the environmental questions. And they know that they always have to be a bit ahead of all the other parties. They have to be a bit avant-garde and come up with new ideas. They're not always tested, these new ideas. And also, talking about climate change, it's not that they really have given us a clear idea how they would do it, but in a way they're always trying to be prepared and be part of the next government.
So suddenly climate politics are, it seems, the dominant political narrative in Germany. Well, not quite, because people in large numbers tend to do things very differently in the eastern German states.
Western Germany is going green all over. The Green Party is more popular than ever, especially with young voters. The Greens are achieving results Germany's major political parties can only dream of. In the east of the country, the right-wing populist Alternative for Germany is growing stronger. In many places, they could be the big winners in upcoming state elections. But most of Germany's big cities, including some in the east, are Green Party bastions. For urbanites, climate protection is a major priority. They want eco-friendly traffic concepts and clean energy. Coal mining is being phased out to tackle global warming. Many in the affected areas consider this a big mistake and fear for their jobs. To them, environmental protection is a luxury only rich city folk can afford. So who can bring the country together?
Vanessa, who can bring the country together?
I don't think the Greens are particularly failing. So for now, they are attracting this urban intellectual elite. But I believe that, and this is what also the Green Party always keeps saying, and they are working on this very hard, is that the green question or the environmental question is also a social question. Because when we look at who is suffering from climate change, for example, yes, of course, there are those coal miners. But first of all, this is a small number. We can find solutions for them. But globally, these are completely different people. These are the poorest people we have here, and they will migrate when climate changes. And also here in the cities, we do have to find like other solutions on how to move, how to be more inclusive about our mobility, how to use energy differently so that we can just keep on living as we live longer or more sustainable. And I think that Greens can tackle these questions. Another thing, what they do is protecting minority rights. Now, we know that there's not too many minorities in the former East, but in the end, they also profit from this discourse, because it's all about protecting the poorer ones, for example, those who are forgotten, those who need more representation. All of these questions are inherently also green issues.
Cordula, you have been quoted as saying that the East and West are more divided than before. I don't know if you meant ever before or more recently, but tell me about the divide, because it's going to be crucial in what happens next in German politics. You mentioned this already earlier.
Yeah, there's less common ground now, as election results show. And it's quite difficult to get your idea across in the East. And you could also argue that in the East, where there is a lot of rural folks and people have to drive longer to get to work and all these things, and they live probably in other apartments. It's difficult to have a climate-friendly policy because it's more expensive for the people there. It's hard to get this idea across that they will profit from it. So, and people, they feel maybe a second time left behind or not really taken seriously. Like in the 90s, like every family, there was one or more people who lost their jobs, and they had really to have a huge modernization to take. And now, when the middle generation is gone already, the young people move to the metropolitan areas or to the West, the people that are left behind in huge areas, in big regions, they think, what is coming? Who's trying to take care of us? What's next for us? We would like to have a share as well. And they're not really the best ideas yet in place.
There's one other aspect, I think, in the East. The Eastern Germans didn't grow up with the West German political parties, these big tent parties, the center-left, center-right bloc. Even the Greens, they're essentially, in a way, the most Western party there is. They joined the Bundestag, the parliament, in the 1980s. They came out of the West German counterculture of the 60s and 70s. All of this the Easterners didn't have, and that's why you have two parties that are unusually strong in East Germany, and really only in East Germany, which are both protest parties. One is the successor, the left, the successor party or the descendant of the East German Communist Party, and the other is the AfD, which in the East, both of them, and there are even voter migrations between them and between non-voters, but they're essentially, a lot of them are just giving a middle finger to that political party system as they see it, which they still view as a West German party system to some extent.
I would totally agree there, but I think the problem is not then that they rely on the car or eat lots of meat, but then the problem is a problem of representation. And this is where the parties really have to work on and see how many politicians from the East we have in our parties, how much are they dealing with the issues that they have there. And these are the things that really have to be tackled at the moment to not just let them stick with the AfD and the left party.
And we have these key regional elections coming up in Eastern Germany in the autumn, in September and October. Do you think that that is going to be a point at which the German government really does fall apart? Because a lot of people are predicting that the results are going to be so damaging for democracy in Germany that that's going to push the current government over the edge.
Yes, definitely. And I don't see how now we can. I don't think that is now the moment where we can change a lot. I think it will just turn out as everybody expects. The right wing, AFD especially, they will be very strong and so on. But we have to ask ourselves the bigger questions behind this, like what exactly happened there? How do we tackle the misrepresentation? How can we put more money into this area? And where do they also, which we must not forget, have a really ideologic problem. And I think this is always hard to say because they will defend themselves and say, like, we're not all Nazis, but we see that there are organized right-wing extremist groups operating there, big networks, and they have lots of money. They're going and talk to, especially the small towns. They have power in those regions, and this is something we should not ignore and say there are only a few of those coal miners and other people who have social or are poorer.
We've got to close now. I'm going to ask one question. We began with Angela Merkel. Is she going to be in office at the end of the year? Yes or no? Andreas?
Yes. General elections maybe in January.
I think she will still stay for a while.
OK, we shall have to wait and see, as they say. Coalition crisis, Merkel, Teetering. Thanks for joining us on Quadriga this week. Bye-bye for now and tschüss.